What you're looking at is quite possibly the next best downhill park in America. With 650 feet of elevation, huge rock faces, and big steep descents, this place is naturally perfect for some quality, chunky, fast downhill trail. But perfect natural terrain isn't all you need for great trails. You need people with dedication to finding the best of the best on the mountainside. And luckily, the city of Ironton brought in Jagged Trail Designs to do just that. These people are building some truly inspiring trails here on Shepard Mountain. And by the end of Phase 1, the mountain will have 2 black lines, 2 blue lines, and 1 green. And that's just Phase 1. But even with all this trail getting built, Alex, the owner of Jagged Axe, reached out to me for a special project. Out of the blue, I received a couple texts and 1 picture reading, "Would really love to do a collaboration if you're up for it. It would be a pretty serious undertaking, but I think it would be really rad to build a corkscrew bridge off of this ledge." I of course responded, yes, 100% yes. And like that, we were off. He added his employee Taylor to the conversation, who sketched up this design, and we all agreed right away that that seemed like the way to go. So I drove out to Ironton and we started bringing this project to reality. Before we get into that, let me just say a huge thanks to my bike rack supplier, U-Haul, for sponsoring this video. As you could probably guess, building a corkscrew is no easy task. There are a lot of things to consider before even marking where the posts can go. So this first day was spent clearing out the entire area, exchanging ideas, and figuring out just how huge this thing was going to be. And after countless times of measuring and scoping out the area, we finally landed on the corkscrew being 30 foot in diameter and 14 feet high. With everything marked out, there was no question about it. This thing was going to be huge, which meant lots of posts, which also meant lots of post holes. So Alex ended up bringing up his mini excavator to make quick work of that. But things didn't turn out as we planned.
Post there. I mean, we're not going to need a concrete here. That's ledge.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're finding is that there's actually a giant rock slab underneath this whole thing. So we might not end up needing all the concrete that we just brought up. But that's okay. It'll make the job easier. And yeah, Alex says that's just as good as concrete, so I believe him.
Now, regardless of what we were tying into, we still needed to use steel brackets and anchor bolts to hold our posts in place. All the bedrock did was keep us from having to pour more than 2 of these concrete bases. And the steel brackets and anchor bolts were a fairly simple process to set up. All you have to do is drill a hole in the rock, place our bolt inside with the steel bracket, and hammer the pin into the bolt, which causes the bolt to balloon out on the inside. This way, it stays anchored to the rock and you can secure your post to the steel bracket.
The post is actually going to sit in this little box. You tie it in around the edges, but it's suspended because it's got this box here that's going to sit underneath it, and that's actually where the bolt is that we tie into. So if water rushes through, it's not going to get trapped on the log itself that you're tying into.
After 2 whole days of clearing, marking, and anchoring bolts, we had everything finally in place to start constructing our corkscrew. Except one thing, the wood. But if you watch my channel, you know that I have a local sawmill that I get all of my cedar from. So I was actually able to take Alex out with me and grab a full trailer load. But the problem we were going to have was getting all that wood up to the building location, which was probably 200 plus feet of extremely steep climbing. Lucky for us, we did have a solution for this. And that solution goes by the name John. John works for the city of Ironton, who happened to have one of these Hummers handy, so we of course loaded it up as much as we could and crossed our fingers that nothing would fall out or happen.
See how this goes.
This is fantastic. If he slides out there, then we're gonna have a real tough time up there. What's your verdict? You think he's gonna make it up? Or you think he's gonna pull it?
Yeah, I think he'll do it. I think the only issue is it's sliding out. I don't think it's going to be an issue of making it up.
Now, this is an extreme case of GoPro effect when it comes to how sloped this hill was. But despite all of my thoughts, John made it to the top with zero problem. So with a lot of our dimensional lumber already at the top, Alex and I got to work gathering support posts. By the end of the weekend, I had stripped 8 cedars that were all 20 plus feet long. But I was very happy with the ones we got and glad to take the time to shape our own posts instead of buying pressure treated lumber from the store. The next day, we quickly got all the posts up to the project and finally started constructing the Corkscrew. Each post had to get this square cut on the bottom so that when we stood them up, they would fit snug in the steel brackets anchored to the rock. This wasn't so bad to do, but standing them up was a bit of a joke.
Let's do that. All right, Seth, just toss it up here.
Stand her up, fellas. That's gonna be
There's something standing. Holy cow.
What do you think?
There's no way it doesn't end up intimidating.
Before we could keep standing posts up, we decided to anchor our structure to the rock face with 2 huge cedar 6x6s. To do this, we drilled 2 holes in the rock and drove a thick piece of rebar down into them. From there, we could drill a hole into the 6x6s and get them onto the rebar. Now, I gotta say before you see this, do not follow our safety practices.
2.
Are you good?
Oh.
That was a lot of
My lower back just goes. Can we move this ladder about a foot that way?
Yeah. All right.
Think about you all the time, like you're a friend of mine. Street lights up when you come online.
Put her in there.
You ain't looking for a savior when you know what you feel. Show me all your good behavior.
At this point, we had a solid base to start working from, so we could really start cruising on building the entire frame of the Corkscrew. Essentially, this meant standing up more posts, adding crossboards for support, and making sure everything met up with the ground perfectly by the end. Just like that, we had the entire frame of the Corkscrew up. Taylor and I went through, put the finishing touches on everything, and got it ready to be decked over the weekend.
It's so hot that the cameras that are up there with me keep shutting off because their temperature is overheating.
Beside the terrible heat, I was also having to troubleshoot a couple other problems. One being, the center boards all needed chiseling out for each individual board. This is because the drop of the inside angle is vastly different from the drop of the outside angle, so there was no way of keeping that middle board flush all the way through. Now, this also caused a large gap on the end of one side of the boards. This meant we had to wedge them. The only way around this would have been cutting into the runners like you would a set of steps, but even sets of stairs have wedges, so I kept trucking along, and over the next couple days, Porter and Taylor showed up, which made the process of decking fly by. After 2 weeks of work, we had finally finished the Corkscrew. We ended up having to cut a lot of the boards like pizza slices to make it fit right, but I seriously cannot be more stoked with how this thing ended up looking. Although the Corkscrew was finished, we weren't entirely out of the woods yet. We had one last thing to take care of before we could ride, and that was the run-in. It's a super chunky section of rock that you have to navigate to get onto the Corkscrew. So, in order to make it a bit more doable, I added in a section of decking over the more ridiculous section of rocks, and Taylor and Alex unsketchified the top portion by chopping out some of the rocks. And luckily, while I had been decking, Taylor and Alex had already shaped up a berm leading out of the Corkscrew. And Taylor added in rocks at the beginning, and Alex and I added rocks to the end to make for a smooth entrance and exit. Now, of course, these guys were riding it no problem. But, as you know, I don't generally ride double black features. But there was no way in hell I wasn't going to ride this thing after putting in all that work. I've got that, like, you're gonna hit something and you're gonna get jostled and you're going off.
If you go here, you're fine. If you go there, you're fine. If you go there, you're probably fine.
If you go over there, though.
I'm going right through there. Woo! Woo! Yes! Oh, yes!
This Corkscrew turned out perfect. It's going to be such an iconic feature for Shepard Mountain Bike Park, and I am so stoked to have gotten to be a part of making it happen. Now, the bike park isn't open yet, but it will be soon, so if you want to keep up to date on the goings-on here, go follow Shepard Mountain Bike Park on Instagram. And the same goes for Jagged Axe Trail Designs. They post regularly about what they're up to on the mountain, and they also are about to jumpstart their trail building YouTube channel, so go follow that too. I also want to say a huge thank you to U-Haul for sponsoring this build and getting me out here. You guys need to go check out their huge selection of bike racks they offer. I've got the NO120 and I'm freaking in love with it. It got me and my gorgeous Polygon Siskiyou out to ride this huge feature, and I couldn't be more stoked with how easy it is to use. Head over to uhaul.com and check out all the bike racks they offer. And if you find one you like, use the code BACKYARD in all caps to get 15% off your purchase. Thank you guys so much for watching this week. A huge thank you to my patrons. As usual, you guys freaking rock. Let's build some more stuff next week, and I'll see you then.
Shep is the sender!